Get out!
The words cracked across the room so hard that even the grandfather clock in the corner seemed to stop ticking. Naomi Whitaker stood at the head of the conference table, one hand pressed flat against a stack of financial reports. Across from her, 3 board members stared back in silence. The 4th wasn't silent. Cyrus Langston leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. "You heard me," Naomi said. Her voice trembled, not with fear, with anger. "Get out of my office." The room was frozen. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Charleston Harbor glittered under a perfect spring sky. Inside, everything was breaking apart. Cyrus smiled, not because he was happy, because he thought he had already won. "You don't get to throw me out because you don't like what I'm saying." "No," Naomi said. "I get to throw you out because you leaked private company information to the press." The smile vanished, just for a second, then returned. "Can you prove that?" Naomi looked at him, long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Then she reached into a folder, pulled out 3 printed pages and slid them across the table. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Cyrus stared, the blood drained from his face. The email chain was there. Every message, every forwarded document, every anonymous tip sent to a local gossip blog. All of it traced back to him. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then Cyrus stood up so quickly his chair nearly tipped backward. "This is a mistake." "It isn't. You don't understand what you're doing." Naomi's eyes hardened. "Oh, I understand perfectly." For months he had tried to force her out. Months, ever since her divorce. Ever since the newspaper started treating her personal life like public entertainment. Ever since she bought her late mother's small historic house instead of the waterfront mansion everyone expected a CEO to buy. Weak, emotional, unstable. Those were the words people used when they thought she couldn't hear them. Today she was hearing them, and she was done. Cyrus grabbed his briefcase, his face red, his pride shattered. "You'll regret this." Naomi didn't answer, because something worse had already happened. Something nobody in the room knew. Not yet. Cyrus stormed out. The door slammed. The sound echoed through the office. The remaining board members sat frozen. Finally, one woman spoke. "Naomi." Her voice softened. "Are you okay?" Naomi almost laughed. Almost. Because 3 hours earlier, she had nearly wired $300,000 to a man she barely knew. $300,000. Gone. Just like that. If a phone call hadn't interrupted her. If one person hadn't shown up at exactly the right moment. If one little girl hadn't handed her a flower 3 days before, her entire future could have been different. Naomi looked out the window. Past the harbor, past the boats, past everything. And for a moment, she wasn't seeing Charleston at all. She was seeing a small yellow paper flower, held in tiny hands. A little girl smiling up at her. And a carpenter standing 20 feet away pretending not to watch. That was where the story really began. Not here. Not in this boardroom. Not with Cyrus. It began 6 weeks earlier, inside a dusty antique store on King Street. The day someone made a joke, and nobody laughed. Cooper & Sons Antiques smelled like cedar, old books, and rain-soaked wood. The kind of place where time moved slower. Naomi stood beside an antique walnut cabinet, running her fingers over the grain. Across from her, Malik Freeman crouched beside one leg of the piece, checking the joinery, examining every detail. He worked the way surgeons worked. Quiet, focused, patient. The owner watched him for a moment, then nodded approvingly. "Your husband knows his furniture." Malik looked up, smiled politely. "Oh, she's the one making the decisions." The owner laughed. "So you're the husband who carries everything." Malik chuckled. "Something like that." The owner laughed again. Malik smiled, then realized Naomi wasn't smiling at all. She was staring at the floor. Her hands clenched, her jaw tight. The owner noticed first. The smile disappeared from her face. Naomi spoke softly, almost too softly to hear. "I wish people would stop saying that." The room went still. The owner blinked. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean. I know." Naomi forced a smile. "It isn't your fault, but the damage was done." Malik stood up slowly. Something had changed. Something neither of them knew how to name. The drive back to Cannonboro was quiet. Painfully quiet. The old pickup rolled through streets lined with oak trees and historic homes. Neither spoke. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15. Finally, Malik cleared his throat. "I'm sorry." Naomi kept looking out the passenger window. For what? The joke. She looked at him. For the first time since leaving the store. His hands were tight on the steering wheel. His eyes fixed on the road. I wasn't laughing at you. Naomi looked away again. Maybe that's the problem. Malik frowned. She swallowed, slowly. When people hear I'm divorced, they look at me differently. She paused. Like something broke. Neither spoke. The truck continued through the afternoon traffic. Naomi watched sunlight slide across storefront windows. Then she whispered something she had never said aloud. Not to her therapist, not to her friends, not even to herself. I don't miss my marriage. Malik said nothing. I miss believing I mattered to someone. The words hung there, heavy, raw, dangerous. Malik felt something twist in his chest, because he knew exactly what she meant. 5 years earlier, he had stood in a hospital hallway and listened to a doctor tell him his wife wasn't coming home. 5 years. And there were still mornings when he reached across the bed before remembering. Some losses didn't leave. They just got quieter. The truck turned onto a narrow street lined with old houses. Naomi's mother's house appeared halfway down the block. Small, yellow, weathered, ordinary. Everyone thought she was crazy for buying it. A CEO could afford anything. Why choose this? Why choose small? Why choose old? Why choose broken? The answer was simple. Because this house had loved her before success ever did. Neither of them knew it yet. But that little house was about to pull them into a story neither could have imagined. A story involving fraud, betrayal, a buried family secret, a fortune nobody wanted, and a little girl who would eventually change everything. But on that afternoon, none of that had happened yet. There was only the house, the silence, and the strange feeling that two wounded people had just accidentally told each other the truth. Without meaning to, without realizing it, the first crack had appeared, and neither could see how much light was about to come through it. 3 days later, the first trap was set, and Naomi walked straight into it. Not because she was foolish, not because she was careless, because the most dangerous predators rarely hunt weakness. They hunt pain. Miss Whitaker? Naomi looked up from her laptop. Her assistant stood in the doorway. There is a gentleman here to see you. I don't have any appointments. He says he knows. Naomi sighed. What does he want? The assistant hesitated. He said if you give him 10 minutes, he can save you 2 years. Naomi almost laughed, almost. Normally she would have refused. But something in the wording stopped her. Save you 2 years. Not money, not business, time. That was different. Send him in. The man entered 30 seconds later, tall, well-dressed, perfect posture. The kind of confidence money often mistakes for character. Naomi Whitaker. His smile was effortless. Pleasure to finally meet you. Naomi didn't stand. Do I know you? No. He sat anyway. A small thing. Most people wouldn't notice. Naomi did. People reveal themselves in small things. His name was Darius Vale, 45. Real estate consultant. Investment advisor, private acquisition specialist. At least according to the card he placed on her desk. Darius looked around the office, the harbor, the framed awards, the photographs. Then he looked back at her. You've done well. Naomi said nothing. He smiled again. But that's not why you're unhappy. Her eyes narrowed. Excuse me? You heard me. He leaned forward slightly. You've won everything you were supposed to want. The room suddenly felt smaller, Darius continued. The company, the reputation, the success, the title. He paused. Yet 6 months after your divorce, you bought the smallest house you could find. Silence. Naomi stared. How do you know about that? Public records. The answer came too quickly, too smoothly. Like he had rehearsed it. Most people would miss that. Naomi didn't. Yet somehow she kept listening, because despite her instincts, he wasn't entirely wrong. Darius opened a leather portfolio and laid several photographs across the desk. Naomi's breath caught. A waterfront estate, white stone, ancient oak trees, private dock, sunlight dancing across blue water. Beautiful, almost painfully beautiful. What is this? A second chance. Naomi rolled her eyes. You're selling a house, not a religion. Darius laughed. The exact right amount, not too much. Not too little. You know what I mean? Actually, she did. And that bothered her, because for one brief second, she imagined herself there. No reporters, no board meetings, no whispers, no reminders of failure. Just peace. Darius saw the hesitation and immediately pressed. Not hard, just enough. The owner wants discretion. Naomi's stomach tightened. There are 3 interested buyers. There always are. Not like these. Darius lowered his voice. They're prepared to move quickly. there it was. Urgency, pressure, scarcity, the oldest tricks in the world. Yet somehow they still worked. Because human beings are emotional long before they're rational. Darius slid a folder across the desk, a refundable good faith deposit. Naomi looked down, $300,000, a large number. But not life-changing for someone in her position, just large enough to hurt, not large enough to stop, the perfect amount. Darius stood. I don't need an answer today. His smile returned. I already know you'll visit the property. Then he left, leaving the photographs behind, leaving the silence behind, leaving the idea behind. And ideas were far harder to remove than salesmen across town. Malik Freeman had no idea any of this was happening. He was teaching Zuri how to sharpen a hand plane. You always sharpen slowly. Zuri nodded seriously. Why? Because rushing ruins things. She considered that, then asked, people too? Malik stopped. For a second. Only a second. But enough. Sometimes. The little girl thought about it, then returned to her work. The blade caught sunlight, a thin silver line. Perfect. At that exact moment. Aunt Bernice pulled into the driveway. And she looked troubled. Very troubled. Malik knew immediately. Something was wrong. 20 minutes later, they sat on the workshop porch. Sweet tea untouched between them. Aunt Bernice held a tablet. Have you seen this? Malik took it. The headline made his stomach drop. Charleston business icon finds comfort in local contractor. Below it, a photograph, Naomi and him, at Cooper & Sons Antiques. Taken through a window, without their knowledge, without permission. The article wasn't openly cruel. That made it worse. It pretended to be kind, pretended to be curious, pretended to care, but every sentence carried poison. The contractor, the widower, the recently divorced CEO, the lonely woman, the working-class carpenter. The article wasn't reporting. It was arranging pieces on a chessboard. Malik kept reading. Then his jaw tightened, because near the end, they mentioned Zuri. Just one sentence, one casual sentence, but enough to bring his daughter into something she had nothing to do with. Aunt Bernice watched him. You know who wrote it? No, I think I know who paid for it. Malik looked up. Bernice's eyes were hard. Holly Reed. The blogger? Bernice nodded. Somebody's feeding her information. Malik stared at the screen, thinking harder, because suddenly, the timing felt strange. The article, the photographs, the whispers, the pressure on Naomi, all appearing at exactly the same time. Like pieces moving together. Like someone was creating a narrative. And narratives don't create themselves. The next afternoon, Naomi visited the estate, and for the first time. She almost said yes. The place was breathtaking. Every room felt designed to heal regret. The water sparkled. The gardens were immaculate. The silence felt expensive. Darius walked beside her. Patient, confident. Never pushing, never appearing desperate. The best manipulators rarely do. They simply help people arrive at the conclusion they wanted all along. At sunset, they stood overlooking the water. This could be yours. Naomi didn't answer, because she was imagining something. Not the house, the woman she could become inside the house. And that's what Darius was really selling. Not property. Identity, a new version of herself. One untouched by heartbreak, one untouched by humiliation, one untouched by loss. Darius saw it happen. He knew the exact moment because he had seen it before, many times. What he didn't know was that someone else had started asking questions that evening. Aunt Bernice called Malik again. I found something. What? Another article. About Naomi? No, a pause. Then a widow in Savannah. Malik frowned. Bernice continued. Same writer. Same tone, same structure, same photographs. Malik sat upright. His instincts woke instantly. What happened to her? Silence. Long silence. Finally, Bernice answered. She lost $80,000 in a real estate investment 6 weeks later. The workshop suddenly felt cold. Very cold. Malik looked across the room. At Zuri, at the half-finished birdhouse she was painting. At the ordinary life they had built, and for the first time. A terrible possibility entered his mind. What if Naomi wasn't being gossiped about? What if she was being targeted? The question settled over him like a storm cloud. Heavy, dark, unwelcome. Because if he was right, someone wasn't just trying to embarrass Naomi. Someone was hunting her. And somewhere in Charleston, that hunter was already preparing the next move. The first real proof arrived at 7:14 on a rainy Thursday night, and it changed everything. Malik's phone buzzed once. Then again. Then a third time. He was sanding the edge of a reclaimed oak mantel in his workshop when Caleb Brooks finally sent the message. 3 words, "Call me now." Malik dropped the sandpaper immediately. Something in his gut tightened. Caleb never dramatized things. Never. If he sounded urgent, it was urgent. Malik stepped outside beneath the workshop awning. Rain hammered the tin roof overhead. The call connected. "Tell me." Silence. Then Caleb exhaled. "You were right." Malik's stomach dropped. About what? He wasn't sure yet. But he knew it was bad. How bad? Caleb answered immediately. "Worse than we thought." For the next 20 minutes, Malik listened, and every minute made his blood run colder. The Savannah widow, the gallery owner in Atlanta, a recently divorced dentist in Charlotte. 3 women, 3 different cities, 3 different stories, yet somehow the same pattern. Every time. A flattering article, a manufactured rumor, a carefully timed introduction, a luxury property, a large deposit, then nothing. The money vanished, the consultant vanished, the companies vanished, like smoke. Darius never stole millions. That was the genius. He stole amounts small enough that wealthy victims often felt embarrassed reporting them. 50,000, 80,000, 120,000. Enough to hurt, not enough to make national news. Caleb's voice lowered. We found 4 shell companies. 4 that we know about. Malik closed his eyes. Rain crashed against the roof. "You sure it's him?" "Not yet. That wasn't the answer he wanted." Caleb continued. "But if it isn't him, he's standing awfully close to whoever is doing it." The line went quiet. Then Caleb added something that made Malik's pulse spike. "Darius isn't the part that worries me." "What does?" "The timing." "What timing?" "The money transfer paperwork." Malik frowned. "What about it?" Caleb answered. "The deposits always happen within 48 hours of the gossip articles." Silence. Heavy silence. Because now the pieces finally connected. The articles weren't random. The humiliation wasn't random. The public attention wasn't random. The victims became emotionally vulnerable first. Then came the rescue. Then came the dream. Then came the wire transfer. It wasn't real estate. It was psychological manipulation. The entire scheme depended on making someone feel small, before offering them a way to feel important again. And suddenly, Malik knew exactly why Naomi had been chosen. Because she was publicly wounded. Successful, visible, recently divorced, trying to rebuild. Exactly the profile. Exactly. The realization hit him like a punch. Caleb wasn't finished. "I have a friend in financial crimes." Malik, listen carefully. The case hasn't gone public yet. There's a case, an active one. Malik stopped breathing. "What kind?" "Wire fraud." The words echoed. Wire fraud. Suddenly, this wasn't suspicion anymore. This wasn't instinct. This wasn't coincidence. This was real. Very real. Caleb lowered his voice. "If Naomi signs anything before we get proof, there may not be much we can do afterward." Across Charleston, Naomi was staring at her mother's dining room table. The deposit papers lay open. Neat. Professional. Convincing. A fountain pen rested beside them. The amount, $300,000. She should have felt nervous. Instead, she felt tired. Exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying an identity everyone expects you to maintain. CEO. Leader. Success story. Strong woman. Role model. Survivor. The labels never stopped, and nobody ever asked if she wanted them. Her phone buzzed. A text, unknown number. The message contained only a photograph, nothing else. Naomi opened it, then froze. It was her, standing beside Malik outside Cooper & Sons, taken from across the street, neither of them looking at the camera. The image had clearly been taken secretly. A second message arrived. Some people recover from divorce. Some people become embarrassing. Naomi stared, her chest tightened. Anger, humiliation, disgust, all at once. Then came a third message, a link, the gossip article. Again. She immediately deleted everything, but the damage was already done, because now she knew. Someone wasn't just writing about her. Someone was watching her. Meanwhile, another storm was arriving, and it came from a place nobody expected. Aunt Bernice. The old woman showed up at Malik's workshop the next morning carrying a cardboard archive box. No explanation, no greeting, just the box. Malik frowned. "What is that?" Bernice placed it on the workbench. History. Malik raised an eyebrow. Bernice opened the lid. Inside were photographs, letters, research papers, newspaper clippings, 30 years of forgotten memories. Malik stared, then saw a familiar face. His mother, Angela Freeman, 24 years old, laughing, standing beside another woman. A woman Malik recognized instantly. Naomi's mother, Ruth Whitaker. What is this? Bernice smiled sadly. The truth. Malik sat down slowly, because suddenly he wasn't looking at old photographs anymore. He was looking at a mystery, one that had started decades before either he or Naomi knew each other existed. For nearly an hour, Bernice told the story. The real story, not the version families tell, the version they hide. Angela Freeman and Ruth Whitaker had met during graduate school, both studying sustainable development, both obsessed with community housing, both dreaming about building affordable neighborhoods owned by local families rather than corporations. They became inseparable. Then something happened. Money. The same thing that ruins countless dreams. Angela's family owned timber operations throughout Georgia. When investors became involved, they demanded control. Control meant profits. Profits meant abandoning the original vision. The partnership exploded. The project collapsed. The friendship suffered. Angela died shortly after Malik was born. Ruth carried pieces of the dream alone, years later. That dream eventually evolved into the hospitality company Naomi now ran. Bernice finished speaking, then pointed toward a photograph. A blueprint lay spread across a table. Young Angela, young Ruth, both smiling, both hopeful. Across the top, someone had handwritten 4 words. A place people matter. Malik stared at it, unable to speak, because somehow those 4 words described exactly what Naomi had been searching for. Exactly, that evening. Naomi arrived at the yellow house just after sunset. She found something unexpected waiting for her. A small wooden bird, hand-carved, painted blue, sitting on the front porch. There was a note beneath it. 3 words, made by Zuri. Naomi smiled despite herself. For the first time all day, she picked up the bird, turned it over. Tiny fingerprints still visible beneath the paint. Imperfections everywhere, and somehow, that made it beautiful. Her phone rang. Darius, Naomi answered. Hello. His voice was calm, confident, friendly. Exactly as always. I hope I'm not interrupting. You aren't. Good. A pause, then. The seller has another interested party. There it was. Pressure again. Subtle, professional. Predictable, but this time, something felt different. Something felt wrong. Darius continued. If you want the property, tomorrow would be ideal. Tomorrow. Not next week, not next month. Tomorrow. Urgency. Again. Naomi looked down at the little wooden bird, then toward the house, then toward the dining room table where the paperwork waited. For the first time, a question appeared. Not about the property, not about the investment, not about the money, about him, about Darius. Who benefits if I rush? The question landed heavily, because she suddenly realized something important. Every conversation with Darius had focused on one thing. Her emotions, never the property. Always her emotions, her divorce, her future, her image, her identity. The house was just the bait. The realization was small, but dangerous, very dangerous. Because once a person starts questioning a manipulator, the manipulator begins running out of time. At 9:43 p.m., Malik's phone rang. It was Caleb again. This time he didn't bother with greetings. I got something. Malik sat upright. What? Silence. Then Caleb said 7 words. And those 7 words changed everything. We found the Delaware bank account. Malik felt his pulse explode. Because if Caleb was right, they finally had something Darius couldn't explain away. Something real. Something concrete. Something that could save Naomi. Or, if they were too late, prove they had failed. The transfer was scheduled for 8 p.m. At 7:21, Naomi was still planning to sign. At 7:58, everything exploded. The rain had stopped. The city glistened under wet streetlights. Inside the yellow house on Cannonboro Street, Naomi sat alone at her mother's dining table. The documents were ready. The wire instructions were ready. The pen was ready. Everything was ready. Everything except her. The blue wooden bird Zuri had carved sat beside the paperwork. Watching, almost judging, Naomi rubbed her temples. For the 100th time, she looked at the photographs of the waterfront estate. Beautiful. Perfect. A new beginning, wasn't it? Her phone buzzed. Darius. Again, she answered. I'm almost there. His voice sounded relieved. Excellent. Too relieved. Something's inside her tightened, Darius continued. The seller is becoming impatient. There it was again. Pressure, urgency, push, push, push. The same pattern, the same rhythm, the same emotional pressure. For the first time, Naomi heard it clearly. Not confidence, not professionalism, desperation. And suddenly she didn't feel excited anymore. She felt watched. The feeling crawled up her spine, slowly, like cold water. Then came the knock, 3 sharp knocks at exactly 7:31 p.m. Naomi opened the door. Malik stood there, breathing hard, rainwater still dripping from his jacket. Behind him stood Caleb Brooks. Both men looked like they had driven too fast, too far, too urgently. Naomi immediately knew. Something had happened. Something big. Malik didn't waste a second. "Don't sign anything." Her pulse jumped. Darius had used those exact words in reverse. "Sign tonight," Malik said. "Don't." Caleb stepped forward, holding a thick folder. "We finally got it," Naomi stared. "What?" Caleb looked her directly in the eyes. "Proof." 5 minutes later. The dining room table looked completely different. The glossy property photos had been pushed aside. In their place sat bank records, corporate filings, financial reports, phone logs, names, dates, transfers, evidence, lots of evidence. Caleb opened the folder. "Darius Vale doesn't own any of the companies listed in his presentations." Naomi blinked. "What? He never did." Another page. "The property is real." Another page. "The owner is real." Another page. "The listing is real." Then Caleb looked up. "The deal isn't." Silence. Heavy silence, the kind that changes lives. Naomi slowly sat down, trying to process everything. Caleb continued. "The Delaware account exists?" He slid a page forward. "The routing number matches a shell company linked to previous fraud investigations." Another page. "The company address is a mailbox." Another page. "The registered officers don't exist." Another page. "The insurance certificates are forged." Naomi's stomach dropped. Everything, every document, every conversation, every promise, built on lies. Then came the biggest shock. Caleb pulled out one final report. This arrived 30 minutes ago. Malik hadn't seen it yet. Neither had Naomi. Caleb opened it. The room became very quiet, even before he spoke, because his face had changed. "What's wrong?" Naomi asked. Caleb looked up. "Darius isn't working alone." Nobody moved. "What?" Caleb nodded. "The information leak from your company." He paused. Came from inside the board. The room froze. For a second, Naomi couldn't even breathe. "No." Caleb slid over a printed email chain. The name sat there. Clear as daylight. Cyrus Langston. The same board member Naomi had thrown out of her office. The same man who had leaked information. The same man who had publicly questioned her leadership. He wasn't just spreading rumors. He was feeding information to Darius, helping identify targets, helping apply pressure, helping manufacture the crisis. The realization hit Naomi like a truck. Her divorce, the articles, the photographs, the timing, the board pressure, the luxury property, none of it had been random. Not one piece. Someone had been arranging the board from the beginning. At that exact moment, the front door opened. Nobody had heard the car. Nobody had heard the footsteps. Darius Vale stood in the doorway, smiling at first. Then he saw the documents. The smile disappeared. Immediately, the room went dead silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Finally, Darius laughed. A short, nervous laugh. "This is a misunderstanding." Caleb said nothing. Malik said nothing. Naomi said nothing. The silence was worse. Much worse. Darius shifted, then again. Then looked at the reports, the bank records, the evidence. And for the first time all evening, he looked afraid. Real fear. The kind that can't be hidden. "Darius." Naomi's voice was calm. Dangerously calm. "Leave." He swallowed. Tried one final time. "Naomi, listen to me." "No. You don't understand." "No. The property is real." "No." The word hit harder each time. Like a hammer, like a door closing, like a chapter ending. Finally, Darius looked toward Malik, then Caleb, then back to Naomi. He understood. The game was over. Without another word, he picked up his briefcase, turned, and walked out. Nobody followed. Nobody needed to. Because 2 hours earlier, Caleb had already delivered the evidence package to federal investigators. Darius didn't know it yet, but by sunrise, his freedom would be running on borrowed time. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The storm had passed, but Naomi wasn't celebrating. She sat quietly, looking at the blue bird, the little wooden bird. Then suddenly, she laughed. One short laugh, then another. Then tears appeared. Not because she was weak, because she was exhausted. Completely exhausted. "I almost did it," nobody interrupted. "I almost transferred $300,000. Her voice cracked. I knew better. Malik finally spoke. "No." Naomi looked up. "You wanted to believe something good was happening." Silence. Then he added softly, "Those aren't the same thing." Something inside Naomi broke and healed at exactly the same time. Later that night, Aunt Bernice arrived, carrying the old archive box, the same one. She opened it, spread photographs across the table. Young Ruth Whitaker, young Angela Freeman, laughing, dreaming, planning, believing the unfinished housing project, the community vision, the sketches, the blueprints, the promise, a place people matter. Naomi studied every page, every note, every dream. Then she looked at Malik and realized something neither of them had understood before. Their mothers hadn't failed. The dream had simply taken longer. 30 years longer. 3 weeks later. Federal agents arrested Darius Vale outside a hotel in Savannah, 2 days after that. Cyrus Langston resigned from the board. 6 weeks later, the gossip blog quietly removed every article involving Naomi. No apology, no explanation, just deletion. Sometimes that is how guilt sounds, silence. Spring became summer. The yellow house was finished. Every floorboard, every window, every shelf, every detail. Finished on the final morning. Sunlight filled the kitchen. Fresh coffee brewed, birds sang outside, and for the first time, the house felt alive. Not renovated, alive. Malik arrived carrying something wrapped in brown paper. Naomi opened it, then froze. It was a photograph. The old photograph, their mothers, young, laughing, dreaming. But now it sat inside a handcrafted walnut frame, made by Malik, the only copy in existence. Naomi stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "Thank you." Malik nodded. Neither said anything else, because some moments become smaller when you talk too much. Then came the sound of running footsteps. Zuri. She burst through the front door, holding a wooden box, excited, breathless. "Daddy, Naomi," they looked down. Inside the box sat 3 carved birds, not 1, 3, a blue bird, a yellow bird, and a white bird. Zuri carefully lifted them out. The blue bird went into Malik's hand. The yellow bird went into Naomi's. Then she held up the white one. "This one stays in the house." Naomi smiled. "What does it mean?" Zuri thought carefully, then answered, "When birds know where home is." She paused. They stopped being afraid of getting lost. The room became very quiet. Malik looked at Naomi. Naomi looked at Malik. Neither moved, neither rushed, neither ruined the moment by trying to make it bigger than it was. Because the truth didn't need help. It was already there. The yellow house, the sunlight, the framed photograph, the carved birds, the little girl, the man who stayed, the woman who finally stopped running, and the dream 2 mothers started decades ago. Still alive, still growing, still finding its way home. If there is a lesson in this story, it is not about fraud. It is not about money. It is not even about love. It is about dignity. The world constantly tells people they need something bigger to prove their worth. A bigger house, a bigger title, a bigger life. But sometimes healing begins when we stop asking how impressive something looks and start asking how it feels when we come home to it. Because the most valuable thing Naomi nearly lost was never $300,000. It was her trust in herself. And the most valuable thing Malik gave her was not protection. It was proof that there are still people who will help others when there is nothing to gain. In the end, that little yellow house became exactly what Ruth Whitaker and Angela Freeman once imagined. A place people matter.